Perfect.
All right, just give it a few minutes, I guess. 30 seconds, 20 seconds.
I'll give it a beat.
Roll in.
They're trickling in.
Here we go. Here we go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today we are joined with CargoChief, and we're going to be discussing the operational tug of war, automation, relationships, and people. And before we get started, just some housekeeping items. TIA's antitrust and confidentiality statement. Discussions, comments, and presentations during TIA functions must not, 1, refer to any past, present, or future rates, prices, or anything related thereto. 2, include any reference to marketing strategies. 3, include any discussion of boycotts of any person, product, or firm. Or 4, inhibit any members' employees from discussing employment with other member companies. Things you hear during the meeting that are confidential and private to TIA should not be shared publicly without its prior consent or used against or in competition with TIA. And then also to submit questions during Q&A or throughout the presentation, please submit them using 2 functions. There's the Q&A function where the presenters will be able to see your questions, or through the chat where that's public, so any of the attendees can also see questions, and we'll try and get through as many as we can during Q&A. If not, we can always follow up with the response. And you will also be receiving a recording and a copy of the slide deck after the webinar. So once it concludes, I will promptly send that over. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it off to our presenters.
Thank you, Stacy. And just for everybody else, we're going to be talking about some things here, more of a discussion, not too many slides. And if you have any experiences that at least related to the topics that we're talking about today, feel free to throw those in the chat. I think for everybody, it's good to collaborate, and especially with the last few conferences that have been going on, like the Technovation show there put on by the TIA. Collaboration is what's going to help us all get over the next pandemic, the next thing that the sun throws at us here in logistics. So it's always good to share your thoughts, comments, experiences, and things like that. So with that, I've got Jim Caine here, COO there at Simple Logistics. Known you for, I don't know, maybe like 3 years or so going on, something like that. Also got Jordan here, EVP there at ARL Logistics. Known each other for, I don't know, about 1.5 years or so, somewhere around there. Longtime users of CargoChief, our platform C4. Not really going to talk about that too much today, but just want to kind of thank you guys for joining us here at the end of the month. It can be pretty busy. But I guess, Jim, I want to start out with you. Tell us a little bit more about you, your company, your business, what you guys do.
Yeah, so Simple Logistics, full 3PL. We've got a team-based approach into the way that we work with shippers and carriers, and our teams. They're trying to maximize the technology that we have available to them while also giving that, that personal touch on the relationship side. So, and that's a big key piece of what we do on a regular basis here. So,
Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan Reber, EVP ARL Logistics. We have 2 sides of our companies. We have ARL Transport. It's been around since the late 70s, asset-based, agent-based, more on the intermodal world. So drayage, we're all you. And then my background's been on the 3PL side. I've been here since 2015. Took over ARL Logistics in 2016. And we are more of a truckload broker with, obviously the drayage and power only mix in there as well.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. So a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about today. Both of these guys are going to talk a little bit about their business model that they've got, your split model, Chicago model, cradle to grave, things like that, and how they work through that there at their business, how they've evolved and things like that. A few other things is tech adoption, what that means for your carriers and your team, and also some sort of aha moments through their journey when they've added in tech, whether it was onboarding through implementation. Also going to talk a little bit about some challenges that we've faced here as a company, what churn looks like, something that people don't really like to talk about, but for everybody, that's a learning experience, whether it's like a shipper moment, things went south, lost that customer. How do you apply tech to help with that to make sure it doesn't happen again? Same for us too. How do we look at feature sets and ways to kind of navigate through demand and kind of with the industry? The other thing here is balancing automation and that human element. So I think it's really important in this industry where everybody favors that phone call and conversation over any sort of button. And I think that it's really just about increasing throughput, optimizing what you've got, but still maintaining that human interaction. Then towards the end, we're going to talk about kind of what we see looking ahead. So as we get into this, we'll go ahead and try to take the slide thing down. I don't know how I'm going to do this. There we go. I think that works. Can you guys see the slide or no? We're good.
I can see your shirt loud and clear, Chris.
Good deal. So Stacy, if you don't mind, we're going to launch a poll for everybody here. Really just kind of about your business model. So if you can go ahead and launch that. Oh, look, it did pop.
Everyone, the participants should be able to see that now.
All right. So what business model does your brokerage use today? Cradle to grave, buy, sell, your Chicago model, support model, assembly line. I don't know. I think we're going to hear some creative ones today. I'd say that something I've never really heard before. So it's always eye-opening when I talk to you two, just the different things that you guys do and what you guys have seen. I'm just going to pick something. I don't know. Oh, it won't let me pick. Sorry. Hosts and panelists cannot vote.
Mm-hmm.
What are we at, Stacy? What percent?
Almost half, and it looks like most do cradle to grave.
Right. Can you launch those results? I don't know if it will.
I don't know if I can display them to y'all.
Okay. So most are cradle to grave, I guess is what we're seing. Is that Jim, Jordan? Is that a shocker? What do you think?
I don't think so. It's obviously it's TIA sponsored too, so I imagine you tend to get a lot of like small to mid-sized guys, so it's really, I think when you think about the carrier side and the customer side, the split model, what kind of scale do you need to be at there when you get to that point? Because you obviously need a lot of freight to keep those carrier sales guys hungry.
Yeah, Jim, what would you say is like how the industry changes? Like, just curious, like on your opinion, as freight is tight to get, as companies change. What do you see like people starting with these days? Is that a shock to you, cradle to grave?
Well, I think that it's kind of a yes and type thing on a few of those, depending on the type of freight. So it's tough to stay in the one specific category. And actually, the way that we build our teams, they start out cradle to grave, and then they go more to support model. Couple of the teams are actually a little bit designed. It might feel like Chicago model within the way that they move freight. And we kind of give our teams the autonomy to sort of like, make the call on that. So it depends on the account. It depends on how we want to approach it. So staying flexible is kind of a key thing with us as far as the type of freight that particular team is moving, what makes the most sense there. So it's a tough one to answer, to say exactly, but I would say from day one, cradle to grave, we're trying to find freight, and then we start moving into it based on what the freight looks like on a daily, weekly basis.
Yeah, I've worked in all models. I'd say from CH to XPO to everything. So except for what you guys do, I'm sure. So I want to start, Jim. You said you had an interesting story. What happened today?
I do, and this is like an icebreaker, a funny thing that happened this morning. So I'm like in that age range where I was born at the tail end of Generation X and the beginning of millennial, I guess. So the Xennial time frame. So I grew up analog, graduated digital type deal. So which also just applies this whole conversation, right? And so not too long ago, I decided to get an electric car.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so already getting judged. I get it. It's fine. If you really want to know it, inside my head, we've got an electric car and we've got a Yukon. So you know you can put your. I got it for the pickup and the fun to drive, but I was basically I'm driving a computer. So I'm backing out of my driveway this morning and the car just stops. And it just jolted me, kind of freaked me out for a second. And I remembered that when we set up the car, you know, it's designed to do that because it's watching around the car. And if I'm going to hit a person or something, it just automatically stops. But of course I'm looking around and there's like nothing there. So I don't know if it was a squirrel or so apparently I can't hit squirrels either, which is great. Or something. So it kind of just freaked me out just to start the day, and it's dark this morning. And then as I was leaving the my driveway, then you know my phone is like in the tucked in and it's connected to the car, and I'm getting text messages and I'm trying to ignore them, but they're coming from people at the office. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? And they weren't displaying the way that they normally do. So in my head, I'm like, what's going on here? I thought I did this right. And then I start driving. I'm like, I'm not going that far. I'll check them out in just a few minutes. And then while that happened, my wife calls me. The call is ringing in the car, but it's not showing up on the screen where it normally does. Then I see that it's in this other section of the screen. I had to figure out how to answer it while I'm still like creeping through the neighborhood. And she called me about like a really important thing, pressing issue, first thing of the day, like if we could schedule a holiday party for my daughter's softball team in December. She apparently had to talk to me about that at 7 a.m. this morning. So I'm just sort of laughing to myself, and there's all this stuff going on. I'm just trying to drive to work, right? And the technology is like, I had to pull over to the side of the road. And as I pulled over to the side and just kind of sorted all this stuff out, I just started cracking up to myself, because it's like, here I am trying to do what I always do. The technology is like disrupting the initial part of my day, even though it's trying to help me, right? Yeah. So I'm like, this is so fitting, because we're talking about. I had a tug of war in my own car first thing this morning, and I just thought it was just funny. It was just a funny way to start the day, and I just wanted to share that with you guys, because it's like here I am in my own head. I've got my, you know, the old school me who's, you know, driving the Yukon, and the new one that's driving the electric car, and they're kind of like having their own tug of war just within myself. So
just trying to book a load, and you got all this tech being thrown at you.
It's trying to help me. It's trying to help me.
Yeah.
And nice that you crowbarred in a little marital tug of war on that. That's not necessary, but
he's not on this webinar, so I figured I could give a little dig. So
everything's priority. Everything's priority when it comes to that. So let's talk about you know, your business model, right? Like Jordan, I'd like to start with you, because you have an interesting perspective here on how you guys look at things, how tech has kind of evolved how your team books freight, and where that balance is between tech and kind of that human interaction. So I guess, Jordan, if you want to start with that.
Sure. Yeah. So I came up through the cradle to grave model back starting in 06 and did that for almost 10 years. When I wanted to do something new here at ARL, I was trying to think of how am I going to do this different? And what I saw in that cradle to grave model, I love the customer interaction. I love how close the sales reps are, and they know exactly what's going on. They can really build a strong relationship with their customers. I didn't like all the redundancy in operational work that would happen on the floor. And I didn't like that it was impossible to follow an SOP, because everyone's out there doing their own thing. And what we figured out from there is when you try to add on tech, when everyone's doing their own thing because it works for them, it doesn't get adopted very well. So when we hit the reset button, I came here, I was like, all right, well, let's work to find any part of this process that we can automate and get it off of the salespeople. And really at the beginning here, we didn't have the right tech. So thankfully I met Robert Cadena and his team down in Colombia in 2015. And I was like, all right, well, I'll start with a couple of Colombians that'll teach them to do these processes and just teach, this is all they'll ever know. So they'll keep doing it, rinse, wash, and repeat. And as we began to grow the business, and we were going to shows like TIA and meeting different tech providers, it was like, okay, how do we use these things to come in here and now start automating some of the ways that we go about either, track and trace to then, booking trucks and now on to other things like building loads. But it's always been that let's just build on little by little. But it was really important that we, within our more hybrid cradle to grave model, where I was trying to keep the salespeople just focused on selling while they're still close to their business, but then having that layer of standard processes that I knew people would follow and then build the tech on top of it. As we got bigger too, we added a small carrier sales team to this because I felt like we needed that watchtower approach over top of your carrier base. So when each of those cradle grade brokers is living in their silo, someone's over there using the technology that we're implementing to start matching freight before the cradle to grave broker even knew it happened. Because their tendency is going to be, oh, I build this load, then I post it. It's like, no, let's as soon as that thing is built, let's start automating how it gets out to our system. But we needed a small carrier sales team that would really focused only on the tech integrations to really gain some of that success. And then whatever excess freight that doesn't get covered by that, it goes back to the cradle grade broker and they'll do what they do.
That's interesting because like when I started at Robinson, we had a ton of tech, but we weren't like managing tech. We were still managing our carrier relationships. Somehow the tech just intertwined in our workflow that didn't cause really any disruptions. When I moved on through my career, like, yeah, we spent big checks on TMSs and tech and things like that, but it was so like evolved from cradle to grave, even through a split model. Like it was still very manual and inundated with task overload. Like it was just very operational heavy, and I can't imagine having a watchtower like environment, like a business model like that. It would have been so much better. I'll say I'd probably be able to book 1,000 loads a month or something.
Well, even prior to that, just simple tasks like track and trace. And, when we're putting that into the system, and you would think everyone would want their loads to be tracked, but it's like, oh, I got to do these extra calls to get them if they don't accept the tracking. It's like, but you'd rather call them for 3 straight days and figure out where they're at. Like this makes no sense. But nonetheless, there it was. So we did that with a team that's all they did, until we got a lot of, acceptance and, saw higher enough that we could then, put it out to the rest of the team. So that's just how we've approached it really, because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later. I mean, adoption of tech by the users is the most important part of this. You have the best thing ever, and if no one's using it, it was a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah, it's like when you have that positive momentum, it spreads like wildfire in your company. When people start to see like, man, how did this guy cover that load? Or how is he booking 500 loads a month or whatever metric there is? It starts to drive a lot of momentum. Jim, how do you guys kind of balance that tech and human element with your business model? And tell us a little bit more about how you guys structure that.
Yeah, so since we've been introducing technology into what we're doing, and I it's funny just to keep saying technology because it's, that all depends on the user, that word technology, right? So we have a lot of conversations in here too with some of the guys that have been around for a while, just to remind some of the newer hires who are just used to this. This is just what we do, right? Well, what was it like before we did this? And there's power in that. That's impactful because people can't even like fathom the way that it used to be. So we just ingrain a lot of the technology that we do, and we do a good job, I think, of vetting what we want to do, going through a process. And really, there's so many options out there to bring technology into your brokerage, but they're not all the right fit for what your model is or your freight makeup or what you really need. So we identify those things, and when we go through that process, we launch that with our group. It just becomes part of their regular daily routine. Our mantra is automate and elevate. And what we mean by that is, we're not automating to replace people. We're automating to elevate people. The part that you can't automate is human relationships. You can't do that. A lot of the challenges from both sides, whether that's shippers using real-time rate quoting you launch that and just put that in their hands, and I don't know how far that's going to go. I don't know how you're going to be able to grow the account without the relationship on top of it, and checking in and refining and so forth. And the same thing on the carrier side. I mean, we use a lot of technology in the carrier side for options, to make sure that we've got great carriers in our system, that we're reusing them. We're giving them the opportunity to pick the freight that they want, that we have offered to them. And so we just continually just work that into our regular process, and then make sure that people are following up. So, I mean, if you get a carrier that, maybe counters an offer or something like that, that's a phone call. So, what else can they do? And we see the return on that quite a bit, growing the carrier network that we have, and just, it's just the human element side of it is huge. So we can spend a lot more time. You talk about booking 1,000 loads a month. That's crazy. That's busy.
Yeah.
Technology though can get you in that direction. I don't know, 1,000 relationships a month. That's a tall task, but you can definitely generate a lot more when you're letting the technology essentially supplement what you're doing on a regular basis.
You made a good point there about, you talked a little bit about the carrier side. I was talking to somebody, I think it was yesterday or day before. They asked us if we, how do we market to carriers? Do we sell to carriers? And I no, really, we don't. And I was like, what's interesting is the last 3 months, I've been talking to a lot of carriers, and when I meet some of our customers, our brokers, and their carriers at the same time, I realize that there's a really big benefit for carriers too, if they're educated in the right, I guess, mindset of how this technology is going to help them build that relationship with that broker. Because sometimes even on load boards, if you guys post a load and it's a lane that one of your regular carriers runs, and they see that posted, and they're going to be like, Jim, hey, I told you I could run that lane every time. Why didn't you call me? It can start to create a void in that relationship. And I think some of the tech that's out there, it does help keep that constant communication going, but also giving you guys a chance to engage with your carriers, and a chance for your carriers to communicate back with you without the traditional, being on hold on queue for 15 minutes and whatnot. I think it's that carrier side. How do you guys think of this, tech and everything? How does that impact your carrier side? And are you seeing resistance to change for your carriers, or do they like it? Or how do you guys address that? I don't know, Jordan, if you want to pick that up.
I think you hit on a good point, though. The education of carriers to what the benefits are, I think, is huge. And a lot of times, I think we may live in our bubbles on our side of the fence and just assume we've been talking about this for 5 years. Everyone should know about this. Well, I was like, the fraud that's going on right now should tell us that the carriers are not getting enough education of what's going on. Because some of these things, as many processes we put in place, there's something that happens, the carrier makes a decision, obviously wasn't malicious, but they got duped, and it was a red flag that we'd all been like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to this, and maybe even playing off of that fraud of working with your trusted brokers, but ultimately it's got to be the what's in it for them. Why is this beneficial to them? So, back in the day, we used to just blast every carrier with every load that we had, and you'd get an email and you would come through that and say, I can do this load. Now it's like, okay, we can get that down. And if you want to live in emails, that's how I get to you. That's fine. But I'm going to send you the one load that you care about, based on the things you've told us, based on your experience with us, based on other bids that you've done with us. So now, when you see an ARL load coming over, it's going to be interesting to you. And working through that communication of do you really want to call in and get in some random broker that's going to try to beat you up over 50, 60, $70, and then you don't even know if the load's there, it's gone, whatever it might be. If you see it there, you're set up with us, you stay active with us, you're going to have a book it now functionality, day or night. So now you don't got to wait for the people to come in. So from what we've heard is the carriers like to do that booking interaction if they can. I'm sure the price is obviously going to mean a lot, but if they like the rate, let me get it right now, so I know I got it. But then I still want to talk to a human that I have a relationship with, that's going to be there when I have questions, that's going to call me to verify everything before my driver goes in there. If my driver gets in trouble, they're going to be there to help. So I think that's where we'll hit them, is however you want to book loads with ARL, you can call us, you can email us, but here's a better way to go through the technology interaction. But we're still going to answer the phone when you guys call. We're still going to respond to your emails at nighttime. Like, we're not losing that part of it.
There was the guys over at Hub Tech and Tabby that I did a webinar with them, I don't know, probably like 3-4 years ago. Big statement. They said AI doesn't take bathroom breaks and it also doesn't have emotion. So it's like, these things work around the clock. When loads get EDI'd over to you at 8 p.m. or whatever, that carrier has the option to book that first right of refusal if they're on your kind of like your priority in your group's list. Like they're going to get that option first, and that can really change that relationship. It's funny, like when you say, calling in and stuff. Back in the day when I was booking freight, there was a guy named Ricardo Roque was his name. He sat right next to me. He booked, I don't know, 1,200 loads a month or something at Robinson, and people would wait for 30 minutes just to talk to Rico. Like it was insane, like how that relationship, like what they build at some point, like you get that stickiness with your carriers and your shippers and everything there. So it is a real thing. Like, I mean, there's a way that if tech existed like that back then, that guy wouldn't have had to be on hold for 30 minutes just to book his El Paso load or whatever it was. So it's crazy how things have changed. Jim, what would you say? Kind of how do you guys look at that education piece for carriers, and maybe even talk a little bit about your team, how you guys drive adoption through that side?
Just right on top of what Jordan just said. He said, what's in it for them? I mean, just think about having conversations about things outside of, in your personal life. When a friend, he starts talking about a certain topic and you're like, what the hell are you doing that for? But they kind of explain why it makes your life easier or something like that. Or it's sales, right? So it kind of matches what's in it for you. So, we talk like, we use technology that gets them paid quicker. We get, there's less calls, all sorts of stuff like that on the carrier side. That plus for the dispatchers getting access to the loads that they want faster. So kind of like that too. We want them to do that, and so do they. That's a great meet in the middle thing, and that's all based on how we can use the technology for it.
Yeah,
we've even had. We've had a couple of, and as simple as like a Google chat. So yeah, we still have the phone conversations, but some of our carriers, they're not as comfortable with maybe it's a language barrier. Maybe there's something there where, they speak English, but we can get to the point real quick on a transactional basis through Google Chat. That's not mind-blowing technology, but it's technology.
yeah.
So we're using those types of things to keep the interactions moving at the on what they need, and then also how we can feed them into that so that we keep the freight moving. So we integrated in a fashion where it's just what Jordan said. It's what's in it for them. We keep bringing those things up, and when they get on board for it, because a lot of them are just kind of it's kind of just like suspicion of new technology, right? Is this just new technology? You just asking me to do this because, this is what is easier for you, broker. But really understanding how that makes the relationship better is the key thing there.
Yeah. Talking about relationships, Jordan, you got a celebrity guest picture back there of our guy, Greg, somewhere over there. He was on our webinar.
Yeah. I keep this close.
Yeah.
Anytime I need a good laugh or say, what would Greg Finnerty do?
Yeah.
Other than yell at me, but to keep him in my office, I can think of him often.
Yeah. So he, as we shift here into the next kind of topic, he talked about using, our product C4, but really the driver for them and the outcome they wanted was relationships. And it was very eye-opening to hear how him and his team like rank carriers and how they treat carriers much differently than any other broker down the street. Like they go as far as, how do they pay their drivers? What do their drivers want to do? Like when do they want to get home? Like very deep conversations. And I think like just to hear people use a product to get them closer to that, like what they want, like that was really cool. I mean, that was kind of like, an aha moment for me. It's just I'm not even using the tool.
He must be what he's already texted me. Hi, Greg.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I guess into that point here, what was that aha moment for you guys? Like when you realize like tremendous value or the, a big impact of what you guys use all together. I guess Jordan, if you want to pick that up.
Yeah, I mean, think I think it was more that watchtower approach that I was talking about, and that was thoughts I had years ago because of the redundant work that was happening in multiple offices, and like literally, like it worked both ways. So you'd have users at each office, or even sitting right next to each other, procuring trucks different ways. Someone could do it in 5 calls, one could do it in 1. Someone had to do 100. They'd get different rates, different carriers, different results. And at the same point, the other side of it is our really good carriers that did a lot of volume would show up in the TMS all the time. So everyone was blitzing them with calls to the point where like they didn't want to work with us anymore. So at scale, like there was no way to stop that. And when I was like, well, this watchtower approach would work, but we just didn't really build the model that way. And it got this so big, like it was hard to turn around. So as we were starting again, I was like, all right, once we get to that size, knowing that, and I don't want to do it with a bunch of people. I wanted to use the technology. So, there's people out there that were already developing these things and using some AI or just machine learning to understand based on the behaviors. And it's a combination of, loads that they're moving for us, but also data that our humans are putting into the system to understand where these people want to see the freight. And it did take us 6 months to a year to really work through that and build up enough. But then we started seeing, and we were seeing some success along the way. But once the digital freight matching started happening, we're like, yes, this is exactly what we wanted to do. And to be honest, that process never stops. This team is still having conversations with carriers, still educating them on how they should work with us, still trying to show them the value. And when you get that first win and they book a load, like you need to call them and celebrate a little bit. Like, yeah, I mean, look, see how easy was that? Let's keep doing that.
Yeah, there's a podcast that we do, Get Freight to It, and there was a guy I had on it's this last episode. We haven't put it out yet. There's a lot of content, but one of the things that he said was like, what's one of, well, it's over here, but what are one of the things that people have today that they didn't have 10 years ago that's usually on your desk? I'll show you. Mine's actually charging, but it's this, your cell phone, right? People have this everywhere that they didn't have 10 years ago. And I think when you celebrate those wins, like even just with your carriers, like we were at a show, the Broker Carrier Summit, shout out to Dan Lindsay over there and the team that put that on. But we talked about just some creative strategies to celebrate those wins or just like appreciate people, where if you book a load and like, you're talking to your carriers, it can go much further than just like, hey, thanks, all right, bye. Like, what about a video? Like, you've already got a cell phone, just like, hey man, this is Jordan with ARL. Just wanted to show you, like, tell you how appreciative we were. That load went so smooth. We're going to send this out to our shipper. Very excited to work with you guys. You got to sell, save it, send it to them, right? Like, how is that going to start to change that relationship, going from a transaction to like this relationship? And like you said, yes, there's emails, there's a lot of engagement, and it never stops. But how do you keep that momentum, right? Like there's a lot more time now for people to be creative. Like Adam there at Simple Logistics, his thing is he says this allows me to do everything else, frees me up to do everything else that logistics requires, and that's one of them, right? Building those relationships. So I guess, Jim, how would you sort of talk about that aha moment, that success story that you guys had, and kind of what that impact was?
Yeah, the interesting thing about that question is, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but I think the first webinar we did, Chris, was about the value of options, right?
Yeah.
And it was about carriers. But shippers need that too. They want that. So back in 2020 is when we kind of launched our first real-time rating tool. And we were moving, 3 loads a month for this shipper who has a huge spot board. It's a lot of random lanes, sourcing, not a lot of repeat stuff. Sometimes there is, sometimes not. And that's just kind of the way they operate, just a large spot board. And we were having a person manually quote that and maybe get to a certain percentage of what's available on a daily basis. And when we implemented the real-time rate quoting and automated that, we started moving 150 plus loads a month with this shipper, but that wasn't even the biggest value to them. So they love the fact that we were moving more freight and doing a great job with it, but they also were loving the amount of quoting we were doing versus what we had been doing in the past.
Yeah.
So we were getting awarded some loads, not necessarily just lowest, but they understood the service value, and we had a quote in the system that maybe we didn't get to before. So that was a big aha moment for us on the shipper side, and we still have a good relationship with them now. But that's allowed us to have more conversations and win other types of freight that they move outside of that spot board. So that's really where things started to kick off there. That helped us a lot, especially with COVID type area. But you take a 3 load a week customer where you can grow relationships and start doing 150 on a monthly basis. That's a huge impact. So that, though, has really grown into the next levels of development into our simple check real-time rate quoting, where we have all these different limiters built into it that we shared. We pretty much share regularly with shippers. We have one that their model is all API. So they may do a little bit of contracted freight, but they do a lot of just stay within the market. So that's the freight we win with them. And on top of that, we each have regular conversations. So rather than responding to emails with a bunch of people listed on it and stuff like that, they're going out to quote and basically pushing a button, and the technology is sending us the freight. And then we can just spend a lot more time. So you have the initial days, and then that iteration has just gone into, I think we have 20 plus shippers that are moving freight with us now in that capacity in some fashion, maybe not completely, but in some fashion. And some of them might also just be using it to make sure that they're in the realm of the market. Yeah. And that's pretty cool when you get to a point to where your relationship is good enough where they may be clicking your API button and trusting the results that are coming back, because that's the way that we've been running it with them. So a lot of that from a lot of success early with it, and then that's just really snowballed into even better product than it was in the original days.
It's interesting, like to think about a shipper, it's not really, if you think further, it's not really just a rate that you're giving them. Like, yes, there's the carrier, the service, all that stuff, but you're actually giving them a lifeline to grow their business. Because if they can book, I'd never really thought about this, but like if you're booking 3 loads a week with a shipper, they're maybe small now, but the more that you provide a service to them, their customers, their consignee, wherever that freight's going, is going to enjoy that service more, and it's just going to help that shipper grow. So it's pretty cool to hear like a success story of you going from 3 loads a month to 150 loads a month or whatever that is. Like, that's, you helped them, right?
Well,
like
the big thing that Jim said there, though, is that freed them up to have conversations.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm sure that's really where the major wins started coming. And those are probably conversations that your guys weren't having prior.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's so we got another poll here. Stacy, if you don't mind launching that one as we get into sort of this next topic here. All right, let's see if I can move this guy over. So the next poll is looking ahead, right? What are your goals for the next 3 to 6 months? Should be a multi-select option here. Want to get away from using load board carriers, build a dedicated carrier network, access to more accurate freight rates, automate redundant tasks in the booking process, change your TMS providers, just some list of things that we've heard people ask about. So curious what all you guys think. And as that kind of gets answered here, Stacy, you can probably give it, I don't know, once it gets to like 60% or so is fine. But want to move on and ask here, Jordan, I guess let's take this one to you. Onboarding new tech. For us, our sales cycle, for those that have been through it, we really have more of a conversation in the beginning, where in the onboarding and implementation side, we get more into, that's when the decks come out, the strategy, the agendas, data quality reviews, ROIs, case studies, all that stuff happens once we talk about implementation, more of a data informed approach on that side. But I guess Jordan, for you, how do you approach onboarding tech? I guess like from if you were to bring on new tech today, or let's talk about tech that you brought in the past, how would you do that without causing an interruption there?
Yeah, and I talked to this on the panel that I was on last week in San Diego. So I think it's really important to get your users involved early. During that discovery phase, when it just can't be me talking to a sales guy about something that I think is going to solve problems for the people that are sitting on the floor. So I think once sometimes, because of the way we network, that's how we get those introductions. But at some point, like really soon, I want to get a couple of my users involved, to hear about what the issue is, what this is going to solve. Are you interested? Okay, good. I think there's a lot of value in then making that tech provider do a demo for those users without me in the room. I don't want to put any bias on this, because if I don't have their buy-in, this thing is going nowhere. So, but if I get their buy-in early and then explain to them the process, and then understanding that like this all moves at different speeds, you need to come into this with a lot of patience, and we're going to do this bit by bit to do it right. Like there's no easy button that's just going to make this thing work perfectly and all the problems are solved. So then you level set that expectation for them and then walk them through that process. But once you have that buy-in, that's the voice that's going back onto the floor to tell their peers, like, hey, this thing's coming. It's really cool. Wait till you see it. You start building up a little bit of that hype. So when it comes out, once again, now we got to level set that with the floor. Like, hey, this thing's going to have bumps and bruises. Like, we got to work it out, even though their process may be defined, and they never did it with us,
Yeah.
and every broker is a little different. So let's work through that. But then as it starts going, then you celebrate the successes on the floor. You celebrate the people that are adopting it faster, and you work through that. I personally try to do that with literally one at a time.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we're talking to our tech providers or people that they're telling me about the next best thing, I'm like, no, it's great. I think it's great, but it's going to be 6 months before you're probably going to hear anything from me. And I'm not just putting you off. It's just like, we need to finish what we started before we start something new. And you can do a couple of these things at the same time, but I always say no more than 3 for sure, or else you're going to end up just causing a bunch of problems. And then the users stop using it, or they're complaining, but you're not listening to the complaints and addressing them fast enough. So better to go slow and be patient and look back at the end of the year and see what you accomplished, rather than getting frustrated with the speed that it's happening.
Yeah. Stacey, do you happen to have those results from the poll? Any general idea? Sort of hard to answer.
So we're at 55%, but most people, it's a tie for build a dedicated carrier network and access to more accurate freight rates.
Oh.
And nobody wants off the load board, huh?
Yeah.
Well, so that's runner up.
There we go. I think it's like, we have conversations with our customers like you guys, and we're always asking, like, how does the risk change for people? Like what is like a risk for a carrier, but also risk for broker and your shipper? Like, how do you navigate through that? And, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are talking about doing more with what they have. And that's not just like their tech stack, what they've got now, how to figure out how to leverage it differently if they haven't before, but also like their personnel, increasing throughput, and also their freight mix. Like, how do they, expand what they've got right now into like this world where you're talking, you were winning 3 loads a month with a shipper, all of a sudden you're going to 150 loads a month with a shipper, like doing more with what you've got, because it's a lot easier to expand a customer base than acquire a new one. And it's, the opportunity cost is very different. So I think it's like creating a reliable carrier network is going to help you drive kind of your rates and just your solutions that you're offering. Jim, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but want to give you a shot here too on the onboarding side, like how you guys approach new tech without causing disruption there.
Well, without just saying what Jordan said, I'll just take it to the next, the other piece that I just want to emphasize on that. Great to have champions. You have to plan it out with a strong go-to-market. And when I say go-to-market, I mean like internally go-to-market. plan for that. And then just keep evaluating too. I mean, if you look at technology and compare it to evaluating people, you're always thinking about like, are the expectation for people, are the expectations properly set? Have we fully trained them? And then where are we at that point? So from a technology standpoint, do people fully understand why we're doing this? And there's a lot of directions for that. Fighting fraud, staying on top of location updates in an easier fashion where we don't have to make that phone call at certain times of the night. All sorts of things like that. Do they understand the why? And then also, have we fully trained them on it? That's kind of a middle piece there. So you have to have those pieces in place. And then I know we're probably going to talk a little bit about like, setbacks and challenges when you have technology adopted. And if those two answers are yes, that's where you need to evaluate, like, did we make the right call on this, or are we doing it wrong? And that's kind of a key piece there too. But you got to make sure that your people are not only prepared and understand why they're doing it and know how to do it, but then when they do, showcase that with the rest of the group. We do some different things on a weekly basis. One of my favorite things to do is to do the one weekly big shout out, because you can do it for almost anybody in the organization. And so it just kind of depends on for what reason are we doing this particular shout out. It could be completely process based. Someone's fully adopted and look at the successes they've had. So you celebrate those things amongst the organization. And then if people are asking questions, then there's probably a training issue or something like that. So that really is key to onboarding the new tech.
Jim, how do you guys handle continuous training? Because as you're scaling a brokerage, I think that becomes a really challenging part, that if people are so focused on revenue, they forget about, without that continuous training and engaging if your users are actually getting this and what they're doing. Like, how do you guys handle that?
Great question. So we have some people who that's essentially part of their role to make sure that we're covering those. So between one-on-ones, this past year we actually started doing an evaluation process that we built internally that's based on a lot of the, let's say the 3-part exam. The first part is based on kind of like how people are doing just on the regular stuff, the regular things they should definitely just know right off the top of their head. The second piece started to get into a little bit more like vetting carriers and using our products, using our systems. And then there was a live kind of like show me piece of that evaluation, so that people got a little bit of a grade. So if it's like, show me how to, do this particular, offer this code or whatever, and they're deer in the headlights, obviously we've missed the boat on training on that one. So all of our people get a little bit of a personalized, and then they work on that on a weekly basis on their one-on-ones. What's missing? Where do you need help with? And then we're going to do those kind of like biannually, those evals, to make sure that we're moving them along.
That's I've heard a couple times like certifications and things. I don't know, we've talked about it for sure, having like sort of a certification, but it's awesome to hear that you guys have sort of taken that on. Do y'all think that's a responsibility of a tech provider or your company?
I personally would love to have a list of CargoChief certified people here that I would know exactly to send to happy hour.
Say less.
Well, and Chris, I said this on last week too. Usage reports from tech providers that are live. Like, give me a dashboard where I can see who's using the product, who's not using the product. A lot of times we have to create that stuff on our own to try to figure it out, or we get a monthly report, whatever it might be. Like, there's such great coaching moments in those usage reports, and to be honest, very few tech providers do that. When I ask for it, they actually don't even have a way to do it. They could show me like at a high level, here's your overall usage, but they can't break it down by user. So that would be extremely impactful, because now you know who are my people that are, it gets you to quicker on those one-on-ones. Like, I'm not going to go to the ones that are performing really well. I'm going to go hit these other guys and figure out the why. Did we miss
Yeah.
our training? Are they just resistant to it? I mean, what's the issue? These are the guys I need to talk to.
Well, and Jordan, you could have like a group as well. I mean, you could have just a group of people on the floor that they're just missing the mark for some reason, and you could get that done a lot quicker by identifying, more of them at one time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We use a platform called Turn Zero that breaks down usage, and it kind of brings us to this challenges and churn topic. Like, we had an issue with churn mostly because those companies weren't on an integrated TMS. And a lot of the value that we have is that when that data can talk in real time, but when you get to a point where you force an application in front of somebody and it's not updated in real time in sync with your data, it can start to create some challenges. And like, that's sort of why we rolled out Turn Zero, and it's been tremendous for us, because we can look at like a user level, your company wide, how many people are doing searches, looking at rates, clicking a carrier, doing all this stuff, and then break it down into like an actual user path. And I think it's called like your success formula. And like, if somebody logs in, what are they doing next? That typically yields success and the outcome that we want. And so we look at some things there. But just a shameless plug there, Jordan, if we haven't taken you through that, we'll take it. So
well, and I think too, you hit there, because I think the biggest resistance you got from me before we got on board is like, if it's not integrated in the TMS, we just can't have the conversation, because it needs to all be in one platform. And then the pushback back to the TMS, the same thing. Like, when they release new things, they can see on a general scale, like, are people actually using it? So you release a new integration, or you release a new feature, but like, they can't tell me which users are actually using that feature, because I don't know, I want to talk to those people first and then figure out why they like it so much, so I can take that messaging back to the others.
Yeah, that pretty much covers that topic. Challenges with churn, right? Like,
the integration is such a huge point. We're actually working on one right now where the why we're doing that is such an easy sell internally. We just have to get the integration right, and then we'll be rolling with a different one too. So
yeah, Stacy, we've got another poll here, if you don't mind launching that last one. Sort of kind of piggybacking off those last few comments there. What are some top reasons for reducing your tech stack? Oh wait, what is this one?
I got the results.
Those are the goals. Oh, okay, this guy. Yeah. So yeah, I think we sort of briefly talked about this, kind of like building a dedicated carrier network, things like that. Trying to get away from load board carriers was sort of the runner up there. So the last poll should be there. There we go. That's the one I'm looking for. Top reasons for reducing your tech stack: user adoption, things that we talked about here. Is it the return? Is it the customer success or customer service? Missing functions, features, or whatever else you think that might be there. I'd say just a comment here for that customer service part. Like, we're a very customer success oriented company, where it's like, if something doesn't work and we both spend a lot of time working through things, and all of a sudden somebody cancels, that's not a good outcome for anybody. Like, it should always be like, reel it back, think about why did we sign up in the first place. Like, I always say this, people aren't looking to buy another piece of technology, they're looking for an outcome, and whatever that is to solve that challenge. Like, it really takes that collaboration between everybody to understand that outcome and figure out how we're going to get there together. Because the worst thing is for somebody to cancel and you never really like tried together, because that's always a bad point at the end and put a sour taste in your mouth, especially even if like you had an experience with tech at one point and for whatever reason user adoption failed. You sort of have that perception that like the product doesn't change or whatever it is, and there's not really anything else thereafter. So just a comment there to try to think about things more of an outcome and a success driven plan rather than just kind of features and things like that. Stacey, do you have any results yet?
Yes. The highest one is return on investment, and then missing functionality and features is second.
Yeah. Interesting. I thought it would be user adoption.
That's the thing with, see, if you have user adoption, you should probably get the ROI, or else you probably made the wrong decision even starting the process.
If you have the ROI and your answer is user adoption, that's on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to, there's ROI calculators in the beginning, but you never really know until you actually get in it. And I think like sharing stories, customer stories, and just talking about things with other customers, that usually gives you a little more confidence in that ROI that you look at in the beginning. For us, we usually, through the onboarding phase, that's part of like completing onboarding is your return and your case study. We show kind of these like trends and metrics. You guys have been signed up with us for a while, so it's long gone for you guys. We'll show you if you want to see it. But there's
what's kind of funny is in the beginning part of the sales process, when someone throws an ROI calculator in front of me, I'm like, you just made these up, right?
yeah, it's real. Everyone would love 13x ROI, but until you're actually there, and you got to see the proof yourself too. So just some comments there, asking your tech providers, how do they handle an ROI? I can't say that there's a right scenario. It's really just, I think like when customers talk to our prospects, that's usually the best thing, because we try to connect them early on in their journey with one of our customers on the same TMS if we can, to talk about the challenges that they had and the outcome that they're looking at today. So something to ask your tech people if you're in that area. Probably got time for about one more topic here. So I guess let's look ahead here. Any emerging tech things that you guys are looking at to help you with this tug of war as it goes on? Because as companies get sold or go out or exit the industry, as same thing for the carrier side, like things start to change and risk repositions, whether it's on carriers, new freight, new shippers, your credit score, whatever it is. Are there any things that you guys are kind of looking at to solve for that you've got issues today? Like if I had to ask you what sucks really bad today, are you looking for a solution for that? Or how do you guys kind of handle that? I don't know, Jim, you want to pick that one?
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there right now. A lot of it back office automation stuff for cash flow, a lot of communication with drivers. One of the ones that we're looking at right now is those, again, there's always like some sort of mundane task that you can find a way to free up somebody's time to kind of do more. So that's, I mean, we're looking at specifically queued right now. Great opportunity there. We have some shipping and receiving locations that will fit in there like from the get-go. And really that's instead of somebody just spending their entire day scheduling loads and stuff like that, maybe they manage exceptions. So we get a little more value there, and then we can have them do other things, maybe look for leads, who knows. So there's a lot of stuff there, but the key thing that we're always refining, I think just in the last few years, we're just always refining carrier processes, vetting processes, onboarding processes. Do you know Justin, Chris?
Justin, you guys?
Butcher? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I exchanged handshakes a couple times. Probably.
Yeah, he's doing a phenomenal job. He's that guy that I think when we were at TIA this past spring, people were talking on a panel about you got to have the watchdog who really has no problem saying no to people. So he's that guy, but he also is so into and we're going to redevelop again process with just with the fraud that's out there, sneaky stuff that's potentially out there where you want to do everything you can to make sure that get yourself covered. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. And then really, I would say the last one is the same thing that we're always evaluating is just bidding and, pricing tools and stuff like that. And just more sources for that to see how we're doing and then make projections. So that's the kind of stuff that's where we're at right now.
Jordan, other than CargoChief, what other what other things are you guys looking at to solve some of those problems you got?
Yeah, and I'll just add on one of the things, come back to the mundane tasks, and so we're looking at, load building in a transactional world. So for our bigger shippers, we'll obviously do API or EDI for load builds, but for the rest, it all comes through email. And shout out to the Technovation Shark Tank winner last week, Jesse from Vuma. We've been working with them and working through how do we take these emails either from the body of an email, a PDF, Excel, or you can even do a screenshot of a TMS system and sending it in there. And so that's something we have always done in Colombia with those resources. I remember when I first introduced this, one of my managers done this, said, "Hey boss, this is what we do." I'm like, "Well, hey, do you want to do this for the rest of your career here? Or maybe we should try to automate it so you can do something else." So I think about any task where your people are mindlessly punching a keyboard, and figure out how do you automate that. So keep talking to your tech providers that are solving those problems.
So that's pretty much the end here. I'm going to share the screen for those that are sticking around. We're hosting a happy hour there in Chicago, November the 9th. Our CEO will be there. I think, Jim, you might be there. Or maybe we're going to force you there. I don't know. No, so some of the team from Simple Logistics is going to be up there. So if any of you guys that are watching this are in the Chicago area or in there around that time, shoot happy hour there in the chat, and we'll be sure to send you guys some details. Kind of the first 10 people that make it get a gift card. So no downside to that. Drinks, food, and gift cards, all free, right? So Jim, Jordan, I appreciate you guys joining me today. It was a blast. Love having these conversations. I think it's always good to voice these things out that people don't usually talk about, or maybe it's in their head, or even in a sales cycle, like us as a tech provider. Sometimes people don't ever really express some of these things that go on at their business until it's too late, and it's always good to hear kind of that. So we're probably not going to quite get to any Q&A. We're already here 2 minutes over the hour, but for anyone, we should be able to capture your questions, and we'll get back to you here after the webinar later through the day. So Jim, Jordan, appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, good time.
Everybody joining in.
Yeah.
Stacy, we'll pass it off to you now.
Thank you all for joining. If you do have any questions and you want to email them, just reach out to education@tia.net, and we'll get them answered. But thank you for your time, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye, y'all.